Good afternoon, good morning to everyone that's joining this virtual boardroom. This is Defense Services Marketing Council's kickoff of a virtual online series. We hope that you are staying safe and staying well and staying home during this challenging period, but we want to carry on the tradition of meeting monthly to share best practices in defense, space, and security. Today, we have the honor of having a great speaker and a friend, frankly, who we've worked with for many years now, Guy Thomas. And before we introduce him, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the topic. We often have Guy Thomas discuss maritime security, maritime satellite technology, but today's topic is really about the man who invented satellite AIS for global maritime awareness and coming out of the shadows. You'll know what that means, I promise, by the end of this presentation, but it's quite spectacular. Before I turn it over to Guy to walk us through this presentation, I wanted to remind everyone of a couple different things. One, we are recording this. It will be used to share with other DSMC members and partners and posted on our DSMC website and YouTube channel. If you have questions, please text them or raise your hand, and if we have time at the end of this presentation, we will call on you, or we will pass on your questions to Guy and provide his direct contact information. And if you're wondering about the slides will be made available to you after this call. Guy Thomas, who is the inventor of satellite AIS and the author of the Collaboration in Space for International Global Time Maritime Awareness, was also the first instigator for task number 1 of the U.S. National Space Policy. He's the author of the U.S. National Strategy for Maritime Security and the U.S. Concept of Operations for Maritime Domain Awareness. Many consider Guy, and I include myself, to be the global godfather of space-based maritime awareness. And when we wanted to have him come out of the shadows with his new book upcoming, we said, how and why were you able to do all this and invent space-based AIS? And today's presentation is all about that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Guy, and I'll bring up your slides right now, Guy. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. It's actually very good to be here. I started as a deck force seaman. In my professional career, I was a deck force seaman on a cruiser. And how I went from there to be the science advisor for the United States for maritime domain awareness is a tale that I'm not sure I believe, and I lived it. But the first 23 years of my life, I was in the Navy. The last 19 years of that, 19 and a half years to be precise, I worked for the National Security Agency inside the Navy. At the time I retired from the Navy in October of 1988, I had signed a piece of paper that said I would deny all knowledge of NSA. It was that classified back 32 years ago. 10 years later, they took the wraps off that, and another 10 years after that, after having literally dozens of people tell me I ought to write your story down because I'd had the most unusual career of anybody I know. I still don't see my slides, sir. Now I've lost your audio. Anyway, it was a whole series of...
Guy, we're going to share your slides one more time. Let's share this again. Stand by.
There we go. All right.
Great. Thank you very much.
Roger. Okay. We're going to run it as a slideshow, right? Basically, I will continue to talk because I know time is short.
Go ahead, Guy. I'm running your slides for you.
Okay. They need to go to slideshow. They're in the wrong view. Almost there. Nope.
Okay.
Went yesterday. Anyway, I started life as a deck force seaman on a cruiser. They found that I could type, made me a clerk. I finished my college degree. I was actually drafted out of college. I was in the reserves. And one thing led to another. I finished my college degree, applied for Officers Candidate School, Was turned down because I was not. Vietnam was raging at that time, and they were looking for people with hard science majors in the top 10% of the class. I was neither, and so I was turned down. But because I had applied for officers' candidate school, I had a completed background investigation. When they needed a clerk for their intelligence team, because I'd completed a background clearance investigation, it was easy to give me a clearance. So I became the clerk. There was 3 of us. Then the other 2 guys, one guy took a piece of shrapnel in the eye while he was sharpening his knife. The other guy was also the chief engineer on the ship, and it failed its operational readiness inspections. So he was told by the captain, "You will spend all of your time on that. Guy will take over and I was his driver, and he was independently wealthy and lived across town from where the shipyard was. And so I spent at least half an hour, if not 2 hours. Sometimes we got stuck in traffic there in San Francisco, talking to him every day. And he was a brilliant man. He went on to be the director of the CIA. He was a rising star in the Navy. He was my champion. He basically saw that I got a commission. But in the meantime, I had met these guys that had come on board our ship when we'd gone off the coast of Vietnam that were, next please. Change. I wonder if you can hear me.
I can hear you, Guy. It should change.
It's still not on slideshow for me. I'm not seeing. I don't think you clicked on the little button right up here that says slideshow.
Okay, Guy, I will reload it and we will start one more time. I apologize. I'll
just keep talking. It worked yesterday, didn't it? So I know it's possible.
Well, it's probably user error. So let me try it again.
Yeah. Anyway, when this team of spooks came on board, when I got picked up, and I worked for them for several months, or with them, they had a beyond top secret communication system, and I was tasked by the captain to review the secret communication system and to let him know if anything came in that was pertinent for him. That was one of my jobs. So I read all of the classified message traffic that came into the ship for 5 months, and I also spent those 5 months with my office was right next to the Combat Information Center, and I spent all of my time sitting at a desk in there working to be available to anybody that needed information. Fascinating career for education for a young man right out of college. I was 22 at the time. Hell of an education. Anyway, I went off to Officers Candidate School. I volunteered. The spooks said, "You ought to become one of us." I was selected for one of them, but because I was a yeoman, I needed more school. And in fact, I volunteered for both flight and submarine duty and got selected for submarine school, which was easily dramatically more difficult to get into than flight operations. I spent 22 months in that school. It is probably, I believe it is, the very best school in intelligence in the United States. Anybody that's ever gone through that school will probably tell you the same thing. Submarines in those days, before satellites being so good, were the absolute star in intelligence, and they still are very highly rated, but I'm not cleared for it anymore. It is about 4 or 5 levels beyond top secret. So I spent my career in that, but needs of the service diverted me to be assigned to flight operations because all 6 of us graduated from submarine school, almost unheard of, and they had only needed 4 of us. And so I was the only one of the 6 that also volunteered to fly, so I got diverted to fly. And they said, "Well, we might need you in submarines later, but we really need you to go fly." So I put best face on it and went forward. And then before I could fly, they said, we really need you to go out on a surface ship. I'm based in Japan at that point. We're supposed to go to a collection operation off Vladivostok, the Soviet Pacific Fleet owned port. As we cleared Tokyo Bay en route Vladivostok, we got diverted to South Vietnam because North Vietnam, the battle in Vietnam had heated up dramatically, and they needed us down there. And so I volunteered to stand watches on the ship. It was the same class ship that I had served as an enlisted man. And within 3 days, I had qualified. My first watch, not under instruction, 15 minutes into my watch, we took a direct hit on the bridge, and I was the senior personnel that left operational. Only one person was killed, but 10 others were very seriously wounded. And so I took charge, got a medal for it. Hard way to earn a medal. I see your friends died, but that didn't hurt my career either. So when went into the ship was knocked out of commission, we went into Subic Bay for repairs, and I cross-decked over to a missile cruiser that went right back out and was there for the mining of the harbor, which was a very unusual event. I was the only Russian linguist on scene. That's an oh, by the way, and at the time I didn't think it was of any importance.
Guy,
yes.
Are we on the right slide? It says operational.
No. Nope. I'm still just seeing the very first one.
Okay.
Slideshow. It's still not on slideshow.
Okay, let me, I apologize. Just 1 second. We're going to stop share and try one more time.
I'll keep talking because all this is background. Anyway, I cross-decked back over to a cruiser, went out on the cruiser, was the job I was indoctrinated for as we went from Subic Bay to North Vietnam's off Haiphong Harbor. We're still not on slideshow like we were yesterday. It's still stuck on the same first slide. The man that was my trainer left the ship at about 6:30 in the morning. At 7, an hour later, we were off the shore, and I was now in charge. Yes.
Which slide number would you like us on? I think we're sharing it now.
Good. Not for me. Let's go to 3.
Okay. Is that 3 for you?
Nope, I'm still not on slideshow.
Okay.
I am still on what comes up before you go to slideshow. You got to click. It's that button just right down from where you are right now, right below that. You need to click on that button. That one, yes, right there.
Okay.
This worked yesterday, guys. Those of you that weren't here. Hey, all right, we're there. No, we're still not on there, but we can go from there.
Perhaps you have multiple screens?
I don't.
Okay, and how is that now, Guy?
I'm not on slideshow.
Okay.
Is your screen on slideshow?
It is.
Interesting. I'm in chat. Same thing I was yesterday, I think. Might have been on record. I haven't touched my screen from yesterday.
Okay, so we're relaunching the PowerPoint.
Okay.
And this is the one Guy that you sent this morning, dated 31st March.
Yep.
Okay. And we will share screen again. Just 1 second.
Okay. Anyway, less than an hour after I assumed command of my first intelligence collection effort off Vietnam, we were mining the harbor, and North Vietnam launched 2 MiG-21s to shoot down the miners, and we shot them down with our Talos missiles. Based on my team's signals intelligence, we told the captain the range and bearing that he was going to see these guys pop up. They were coming right at us, so it was a easy bearing to give him. And on this bearing, you're going to see 2 airplanes pop up pretty soon. They're MiG-21s told to attack the mining airplane. We shot them down. But then an hour later, which was rare in my career field, actually be directly involved in combat. Next. Next below that. Okay. There's the submarine school that I mentioned a few moments ago. These are all the different courses that we took. It's not all of them, but it's most of them. But we learned every sensor on the submarine. Next. 3 operational cruisers. This is an overview of it. I served eventually in 3 missile cruisers, 2 submarines. One of those submarines went out back to back to Petropavlovsk, and 6 different reconnaissance airplanes. I directed the acceptance test of the first 2 airplanes ever to use computers to run their mission system. EP-3E for the Navy, the RC-135 Rivet Joint for the Air Force. Next. Trained to submarine. This I talked about this. Trained to submarines, diverted to air ops. Needs of the service, so better get over it. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Next. Okay, the horn. I've already talked about this. Basically, I learned how to use the electronic warfare system on the ship. I was also there when the horn found 2 MiGs flying down the coast off Vietnam. Long Beach was well out to the sea of us, but they had a much longer range weapon system. It was right in the edge of our weapon system. They were 35 miles from us, and they were about 50. We had a 35-mile range weapon. The Long Beach had a 75-mile range weapon. They launched on it off our radar. That's the first time in history that's ever been done. Next. Warden, this is what I'm talking about. Yep, as I said, I took charge, and after the ship was hit by a friendly missile, by the way, but it still killed people, just a very efficient weapon. It actually knocked out, we had like 8 radars on the ship. It knocked out 7 of them. It was designed to knock out radars. The warhead had little cubes, square cubes. Next. And now I'm talking about Chicago. The missile cruiser. Anyway, I was the only first Russian in the scene after we mined the harbor. One of my Vietnamese linguists turned to me and said, turned to the chief, who turned to me and said, "This isn't French or Vietnamese or English. I don't know what language it is." It turned out it was Russian. I'd just come out of Russian language school and was still pretty good in those days. And it was 2 ship captains discussing what their secret orders were from Vietnam, from Moscow. And I took a transcript of it and sent it back to the president, which is called a critic. I'm the only officer I ever know that on his own skill set sent a burst message back to the White House saying, "Dear Mr. President, you might like to know that." I actually did it without telling the captain because I had that authority, and he was actually a little pissed off at me for doing that. But that was what my orders were from NSA. As I said, I worked for both organizations. And the president liked what I'd done, and Henry Kissinger sent me a personal congratulatory message. But because of that message, I didn't get a missile. I didn't get a medal for shooting down the MiGs. Next. You should be on Chicago. Right. There we are. Tails missile shot. As I talked about that, they were going to shoot down our mining aircraft, and we shot them down instead. That was the 9th of May. The 10th of May, we launched the biggest airstrike ever to go into Vietnam. It lasted about 5 hours, starting about 7:30 in the morning. The 3 aircraft carriers that were in the Gulf of Tonkin all launched their entire air wing, and we shot down 2 MiGs in the very first minutes of it, based on totally on SIGINT until they were within visual range. We didn't hold them on radar. And then as the Navy, about 200 airplane strike went home, the Air Force launched a 100 airplane strike that came in, and we shot down 2 more MiGs. They shot down one of ours too, unfortunately, in that air battle. And then it turned into a melee, and we kind of lost track. But during the day, we were able to tell who was taking off from what airfield and where they were being ordered to go, which was of some value. The rest of May and the first 2 weeks of June there were more air engagements in that entire period than there was in the entire war before that, because the North Vietnamese we started using our B-52s against their airfields. And they obviously thought they're going to come up and fight and die like samurai, die like warriors they were, rather than let us destroy their airplanes on the ground. And I participated in 28 MiG engagements when it was all over. That is the record by a long way for anybody in my career field. Maybe it's the record in the Navy for anybody except the air intercept controllers on the cruisers. Next. Well, I went and flew for a couple of years, and then I was part of, this is my last time on a surface ship. Just click one button, would you please? I ended up being the intelligence coordinator for a multi-ship task force. The Horn and a destroyer with us, a missile cruiser and destroyer with us, snuck into the Sea of Japan with only our commercial radars up. We got all the way to almost off within visual range of Vladivostok when before we were seen visually by a patrol boat. And the stuff hit the fan, as we have a saying. They launched everything they had to come find out who the hell we were and what we were doing. And after we'd collected a lot, we kind of drifted off to the north and went out the strait between Japan and Russia called the La Perouse Strait, up between the Sea of Japan and the Sea of Okhotsk. And transited, and by the time the dawn broke the next day, we were pretty near the center of the Sea of Okhotsk. And next slide, that was my 35th birthday. And the Russians, we also were locked up by a missile patrol boat, fire control radar, locked its radar on us. And the Admiral didn't like that at all. He almost shot him, but that would have really stirred the pot. Our job was to stir the pot. We did a very good job of it. The next day, the Soviets launched 2 squadrons of 16 airplanes each with armed with 2 missiles. So we had 64 air-to-surface missiles locked on the Warden at the same time, or serially, actually. They came in what's called a bomber stream, one behind the other. They came in to about 35 miles with at radar range. They brought up their their missile search radar, then turned on the homers on the missiles, and then at 35 miles broke off. And it's not because they were couldn't see us. That was the range of our missiles. They were, in fact, they knew that. And so what they were doing was using our ship as target practice. And Captain and the Admiral, neither one liked that at all when I reported what we were seeing on our radar scope. We went across the Sea of Okhotsk and out the Kuril Island chain, and it just turned south the next day when 2 long-range bears attacked us, basically, and targeted us with their data link. And practiced launching weapons on us. That too. They actually designated to a missile submarine, and we were able to read the data link, and that told us where the submarine was. And we had P-3 anti-submarine warfare airplanes with us. They went and located the submarine and started tracking it. Again, it was a very exciting day. Next. I don't even know what the next slide is. I finally started flying. One of the 2 things I had volunteered for. Originally flew in the EC-121, great collector, but the airplane was getting pretty old. During my time in 121s, we had 2 emergency descents. Once we thought we had a fire inside our radome, and in fighting the fire, I damaged my knee severely. It still hurts to this day. As we dove the airplane, it got pretty. It was pointed down like this, and I was trying to walk up, and I stepped through a hole in the hatch that had been opened and by one of the people going inside the belly of the airplane to fight the fire. It was a bad day. One other time we were there south of Vladivostok, east of China and southwest or northeast of Korea, and a series of MiGs came up, and we weren't sure whether we didn't have any either Chinese or Korean linguists on board. All we knew that they appeared to be excited, and they were coming our way. In fact, the Russians launched against them, and they were coming right at us, so we dove for the deck, and we got so low that our wave hit a radome. I thought we were going to crash into the sea. One other time, the CIA got a report that North Korea was going to invade South Korea, and we were the only reconnaissance airplane available. So we went through a hurricane to get to the DMZ to see what was going on. It was a pretty exciting day. It's my only hurricane penetration. I hope never to do that again. Pretty sure I won't. It was not fun. A reconnaissance airplane is not a hurricane hunter, and some of our gear broke loose and almost landed on my deck. And also, it was not unusual in those old airplanes to lose an engine. The mission was worth it, but we were hanging our ass out. Next. Then I went to the Vietnam ended, and they brought the EP-3Bs, which were flying off North Vietnam. They came up. The 121 had a soft wing and was an easy rider, and my job was to stand behind the operators and read what was on the screens. But it was very hard on my knees. But I did see from the EP-3, the easiest thing I could talk about, just about, was we saw a submarine launch of a Yankee-class submarine launch its long-range ballistic missile. And it came out of the water, but clearly we saw it with the engine ignited as it came out. In the U.S. Navy, the weapons are blown to the ocean blown into the surface, and then launched, as you can see in the various videos that are taken of our launch. This guy launched underneath the water. It was really interesting to see. It was at night, and it looked like somebody turned on a spotlight under the water, and then it went up. And the only other thing I can talk about is two other times that our pilot, we were off northern South Korea, and the pilot decided to see how slow the airplane could fly in the 200-knot headwind we had. He turned the engine off, put him to idle, and then decided we needed to go back the other way, and turned the airplane without bringing his engines back online. And we spun, and we stalled and then spun the airplane. We lost 8,000 feet. I thought I was dead at the time. It was not fun. I was standing in the back of the airplane. I grabbed onto something and hung as the airplane went round and round and round in circles. Yeah, this was a not fun day. One other time I was again standing in there, and we almost hit a 747 SP, almost the same spot. 747 SP is a special performance. It's a stubby version of about a third smaller than a regular 747 Boeing. And it was climbing very fast, almost hit us. Finally got assigned to submarine duty. Next, at last, what I finally trained for. Next. Okay, I made 3 trips to Petropavlovsk in 1974. The first one, the Pintado, was cut short. We had a collision with a Soviet Yankee-class ballistic missile submarine. It was a big whoops, or as we'd say in the Navy, oh shit. Definitely ruined our day. But I went back out on the Pogey, I qualified, and went back out on the Pogey and spent 6 months with them. Both of our trips were highly successful. Very, very good. It's a highlight of my career in a lot of ways. Got a lot of recognition for what we did on Pogey. Next, so much so that, well, let's go to this slide. On my last trip on the Pogey, one of the highlights of my career again was watching the entire Soviet ballistic missile fleet sortie leave port with all of their electronics shut off so that they would not be detected by anybody. But we heard them on sonar, but we saw them go into dispersal positions around Petropavlovsk. I thought I was at the start of World War III. We actually loaded our weapons and were prepared to sink the ones we could reach. If they had opened their missile doors, we weren't even going to let them shoot. It was a very tense day. I sent a burst message back to the White House. One other time, toward the end of our last patrol, a Soviet sub fired a torpedo from 8,500 yards away, and it just missed us. Was that an accident, or were they trying to get their attention? Don't know, but it's the only time I've ever heard grown men giggle when it missed us. The captain turned to me. I was the acting ops officer at that point. Asked me, it was a war shot, and we had just had antennas up, and I said, electronic environment up there, sir. There's nothing going on. Can't imagine that they would launch without warning on us like this. It may have been just a total accident, but it was scary as hell. We also, a little later, hit a seamount. We were sneaking up on the entrance into a Petropavlovsk harbor, and there was a seamount out there. Pretty did in the nose of our submarine. That too was pretty scary. And it was one other thing we collected again. One of the reasons it was so highly classified that I even can't talk about it to this day, but it got the attention of the CIA big time. Next. With all this background, I was selected for the number one honor, the number one job in Naval Intelligence. I was going to be the team collector on the halibut. Maybe some of you have read the book Blind Man's Bluff. That's the ship I was going to be on as the team collector. It was, and then at the last minute, let's see if we've got to if we can click one click. There you go. It said that already. Next click. The reason I got pulled off the halibut was because I was the only person that was flight qualified that had computer in my service records. And I did have the confidence of my commanding officer, but and I certainly didn't have a degree. I went back and got a degree in computer science later on in my life, but back then it was the dawn of time. Next, as far as computers used.
Just for a time check, we have a few more minutes for the presentation.
Yep, let's go. Okay, needs of the service again. I directed the acceptance test to the EP3E. Next. Basically, the thing I would say here is the senior NCO is threatened by the computer. They thought it was going to replace them. It was an interesting leadership challenge, and it was super preparation for my time with the Air Force. I basically instituted Systems Engineering 101. We found out what was the next slide. This is what the next slide says. I've instituted Systems Engineering 101 on how we figured out what was wrong with the airplane. We did find out, and we fixed it. What I did was standard stuff today, but back in '77, it was brand new. Next. Most exciting mission. Watched a BE-12 Soviet anti-submarine warfare request permission to attack an unknown submarine. I know what that submarine was. The BE-12 requested permission to attack, and I sent a string of messages back to the White House relaying that things might get ugly in a minute. Next. Also was the SIG guy that went and helped exploit the MiG-25 that was flown by Viktor Ivanovich Belenko to Japan. I was one of the core members of that team. Next. I was assigned as a head of linguist training and certification at the Air Force when I went there because it was close to my grandfather and I had young kids. Thought it'd be nice to get everybody together, the family together one time in my career. But they took one look at my record and what I'd done with EP3 and assigned me to fly and to generate a flight operations. Make a long story short, and being that we are cutting this, 5 months later, I took over the Rivet Joint Test job. It was a senior 06 position, and I was the Navy Lieutenant Commander. Next. Colonel, when he asked that day, I'd known him about 2 days at that point, said, "What do you think? Think this can be a good job?" I said, "Colonel, I don't have the imagination to write myself this good a set of orders." It's a true statement, I don't. Next. Anyway, I also walked the Admiral Turner, my old commanding officer from Horn, through a rivet joint. He was going to cancel the budget for both it and the EP3E and convinced him to not do that. The budget was restored, and as my colonel said, "Guy, you've earned your pay. You don't need to come to work for the next year." Next. Anyway, as tasked, I wrote the paper about how to coordinate the Navy and the Air Force, also suggested and sketched out how we can do an aircraft exchange, everything. General liked it. Next. And so next, I've already said this. I spent 25 of the next 27 months on the road. Probably cost me a wife. She was less than amused. Especially since I've been gone 2 months out of 6 for the previous 7 years, either on surface ships or flying off Russia or sailing in submarines off Russia. My 2 most memorable flights, my very first flight, we went to Vietnam in the Air Force. I thought they were playing Scare the Squid because they were talking about MiGs coming up to shoot us down. And then we dove from 30,000 feet down to 200 feet. Actually, we're supposed to try to level off at 500, but we leveled off too low. And the airplane was pointed straight down for about 2 minutes. That was one of the more scary moments of my life, too. My first flight over the Baltic was the day after Poland declared we were going to leave the Warsaw Pact. The Soviets didn't like that and were loading paratroopers. They flew. Their airplanes came up in the most aggressive manner any of us had ever seen. I thought I was going to be shot down that day, too. That day, we took the airplane and violated the Swedish airspace to make the Swedes react to us and save our ass. It was an interesting day. Next. Went to the War College, had a hell of a career there. Very, very lucky. I also did a vulnerability on my own of the Navy's C4I. It ended up being the sticking stone the rest of my career. Next, the bottom line, we had a conference in '86, and the 3 admirals that ran Navy space came to the conference to discuss what my findings were. The admiral that led Navy space told me I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. It wasn't the word he used. He was less than amused. I told him, sir, I've been studying it for over 4 years now. If there's a fix to this problem in there somewhere, nobody knows about it. And anyway, and that was a low point of my career. Actually, I thought my career was over. He was so pissed off. 16 months later, I saw him at another conference, and he came over to me, or had me come over to him. He waved, and I went to him. I was trying to avoid him at the other end of the room. And he said, I'm glad I saw you here, guy. I want you to know that I have spent $350 million, $350,000, not million, studying the problem you identified. And you were right. And let me buy you dinner. That was the high point of my career. I never got anything else out of it, but I had identified a problem with our satellites, because at the end of my time in the Air Force, I also was the director of airborne and remoted reconnaissance operations. We said remoted in those days because we didn't want to say space. We didn't admit we had satellites until long after I had retired. But I was also, my last several years, I was in charge of putting systems and making sure they worked on satellites as well. So that's how I became a space guy. I actually did it in the classified world, but I couldn't tell anybody about it. That's one reason I didn't talk about it until long afterwards. That's why I also worked after I retired on putting a wideband antenna, the first wideband antenna on Air Force One. And that's what I claimed that gave me the background, which was true. It did too. But I already was a space op. I was the first person in the Navy to see combat in all 3, submarines, air, and surface. And I was the first person to be quadruple qualified as a space ops guy too. So I had a very odd career, from a guy that started out as a deck force seaman who sold donuts door to door to pay for going to school. It's been a good ride. So there we are. Let's go to the end of this. One more. These slides, by the way. Oh, yes. Go back one, please. 3 years later, after I retired from the Navy, I was helping this company set up a export-import business. They spoke Russian. That's one of the reasons I was working with them. And I became suspicious that it was a front organization for a spy ring, literally. And you read this in books, but so these guys aren't who they say they are. I don't know who the hell they are, but they're not who they say they are. So I phoned the FBI. Had a nice chat with the FBI, and pretty soon I'm basically said, this is what we want to know. And so I stayed working for these guys, and actually one of them figured out I was with the FBI, and he wanted to defect. That was an interesting story too. But after 2 months, they learned enough, and they said, Guy, thank you very much. We'll take over from here. 9 years later, they arrested 23 of those people. I identified 4 of them. They arrested another 19. And they gave it the bottom line is 9 years later, and they said, 9 years ago, we received this tip from a citizen. That's how we knew to get these guys. And that citizen was me. So that was my career as a spook.
Guy Thomas, Thank you very much. We have run out of time for questions today, but we will be sending out these slides to everyone that participated. Guy, I can't thank you enough for giving us all the background. We always knew you as the inventor of space-based AIS, and we've worked together on countless maritime security conferences, but I always had my suspicions, and now I know the truth. So I'm looking forward to reading the book, and I'm looking forward to seeing the movie.
And I'm looking for a publisher. Anybody knows a publisher.
To all those DSMC members and partners that took part today, thank you very much for your time. Stay safe, stay well, and stay at home. And we'll see you at the next DSMC virtual boardroom online. Thank you very much.